Okay, so it's 3:30. If you're just joining us, please make sure you have signed. Oh, I love all the faces. That was great. um, please make sure you've signed in to the chat and let me know your campus, what grades attending, just so I can kind of keep a little bit of track of who was and wasn't able to attend. We will, to let you know, if you've got somebody from your campus that isn't able to join us today, I will be loading the recording of this. I just hit record, so it is recording. So providing no technology mishap, we should have a recording of today's meeting so that you can share it with colleagues who may not have been able to attend. I will also share a link to the slideshow. Now, currently, we aren't really able to use the Google Plus community anymore, so be looking in the white space in Forethought, and if you don't know what that is, right there beside where you have all your buckets and your files, that empty white space each week where I type the what's new, looking forward, that kind of stuff, I will leave a link in there either to a Google Drive folder or to a YouTube channel. We're trying to really play with how we're going to house all of our Zoom sessions. So I'm excited to see we've got a good group here. Even my teammates are joining me today because I am the first guinea pig to talk about workshop model with everyone. Kindergarten teachers who are joining us today, thank you. You sat through a lot of learning yesterday, and we're piling on a little more today, so I'm really glad to have you here with us. I anticipate or hope that we're going to have a pretty large group, so we may not have a lot of space for talking. There will be a couple times I'm going to ask you to share your thoughts in the chat. And maybe a little bit of collaboration out loud, but I know with a larger group that's harder. A lot of the intent today is to kind of talk about the workshop model, and you're going to get a little brief bit of information about our new resources. So I know today is going to be a lot of me talking to you. I'm going to be reading a few points on the screen just because I want to make sure those are shared with people who are not here with us. So just kind of bear with me today. This may not be the most interactive Zoom session we've had, but hopefully it'll provide you with some good information as you start to prepare for next year. I know it's May and all you want to think about is next year. Really all you want to think about is summer and getting through to the summer. So we'll give about another minute or two for people to check in. How about while we're waiting, join with your team that's there. Why don't you turn and talk about what you can't wait for this summer. So visit just for a minute at with your team, and we'll be back in just a sec. Oh, okay. So it's only $2 on the Okay. I know I've given you just a minute to chat. It's almost 3:35. So for the next couple of minutes while we're giving that last little bit a chance to join us, I would love for someone to share what is the thing you are waiting for and anticipating in your summer. I do have you all muted, so you're going to have to unmute yourself when you're ready to share. But let us know, what are you waiting for this summer?
I'm Karina, and I'm waiting for my baby in July.
Yay, a summer baby. I'm so glad the baby's coming in July. You at least don't have to make it through all the hot months. That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm going to share. Hi.
Hello.
Hi, can you see me?
Possibly. Tell me who it is. Oh, there you are. Yay. Canada. Hello.
Canada. I'm excited about going to Toronto, Canada in July.
Whew. Hopefully it'll be a little cooler there than it is here.
Hopefully.
In July. Anybody else got a big trip planned? Nobody?
Hi, I'm surprised that I have my first ever cruise with 16 of my line sisters.
That sounds like some fun. First time.
Oh, are you going anywhere?
No.
We have
Really?
someone going on a Disney cruise.
Oh, hey.
Oh,
You know, I
that's
tried
good.
to talk my two teenagers. I have two teen boys, 13 and 17, and they both are scared to death of going on a boat. I was very sad. So we're going to drive to New York instead. That ought to be fun with two teenagers, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's 3:35. I'm so excited. I hope you have something you're looking forward to this summer. If nothing else, just some time to relax before we get ready to head into this new exciting year with all the lovely, wonderful new stuff that's going to be going on in ELA. And I say that in jest, but it really is. We are so excited about the changes, about the new standards, the new materials, and just a chance to kind of refresh and revive what we're doing in our classrooms. So our purpose today is to discuss the workshop model. I want to mostly talk about, these three things. Let me get my slides working well. There we go, the why. So we're going to talk a little bit today about why. So why are we moving to a workshop model? I know many of you, all right, we've been doing writing workshop for quite a while. So why do we need to think about changing our whole literacy block to this idea of workshop model? So we're going to talk about the why. We also, hope to talk about the what and the how. So what is the workshop model outside of writing workshop? What is it? And then how? How are we going to do this? Because yes, we've adopted a basal series, but what I want you to know in my notes, and if you see me kind of looking off to the side, I wrote myself some notes because I want to make sure I give you the most important information. And in my notes, I wrote that this basal series is not your grandma's basal series. It is not the basal program of the old. Yes, there will be time where students are working with common text and everybody's kind of reading from the same one, but you are going to get a wealth, and I'm talking major wealth of books and resources, things for kids to be reading. So our whole goal is to have kids reading as much as possible. But there is going to be a little bit of blending of kind of this theory of workshop and a basal series. So hopefully by the end of today, maybe you'll have a little better picture. I am going to start now and say it is exciting and clear, sort of. Don't feel alone if you feel a little confused by the end of this. As the more I dig into it and the more I work with it, and we're even starting to plan your overviews and some of your curriculum for next year, the more we work with it, the more clear it becomes and the more excited we become about taking a little bit of a new approach. So let's keep diving in here. So I want you to think to yourself for just a minute and talk to your team. This is my question I'm going to pose to you. We always think about the worst that can happen, or we see something and we're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe they're going to do this to us. Instead of thinking about that tragic side, I want you to stop and talk about what's the best that can happen. If we embrace a new approach, a new philosophy to the standards that we're looking at, what is the best that could happen? So just talk for a minute with your team. What's the best that could happen? Feel free to respond in the chat as well.
Anybody want to put anything in the chat?
You don't have to respond in the chat, but I'm really, really hoping that it's going to make it easier to have cohesive thoughts.
I heard that. I'm not sure which campus that was, but this idea of having cohesive thoughts. Like, I'm going to keep kind of scanning the
Hamby.
chat. That was Hamby?
Yes.
Thanks, Hamby.
Are the new teaks available on the website yet?
You can see the new teaks on the TEA website. Yes, they are there. You're welcome to go ahead and start to look at them. In the new teaks training, we're really going to break down the structure and dig pretty deep into them, but they are available on TEA.
And will that training be in the summer catalog?
Yes, comes out May 6th.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, so somebody else share. What's something good that could come out of kind of rethinking our approach, starting with something new?
Maybe we can find more ways to reach more kids on a deeper level.
It was really quiet. I think I heard more ways to reach more kids.
On a deeper level. Yeah, it's Vicky.
Okay, I hear you, Vicky. You must be a little ways from the mic. I can hear you though.
Sorry.
That's okay. I like this one, Gentry. Thanks. Students will be able to approach and tackle a variety of text. Guys, that is going to be huge, huge. We're not teaching in this siloed sole genre approach or siloed in on one SE. It is going to be very Oh, I just realized my camera wasn't open. It is going to be a much more connected piece. We're going to be coming in and out of various genres throughout the week. So yeah, they're going to encounter a lot of text. Okay, so I'm seeing some questions come up about word wall. Yes, it will be changing. I really advise you to, and you're going to be in the same boat as everybody, so please don't feel alone. For those of you who are planners and want to have everything for the first 2 weeks run off before you leave for summer, I'm really sorry. It's just, this isn't going to be the year for that. We're going to be taking it a little bit slower, and because everything is new, so yes, word wall is going to be new, so don't go print your word wall words and get them put up before you leave, because there will be some changes. So if you ask, is there going to be a change to something, my answer is probably almost always going to be yes. I know that's tough, but it's just part of the change, and it's kind of a monster for us here in the office, and so just be patient with us, and we're doing the best we can. All right, I'm going to keep heading on because I want to make sure we have time to talk about this. I chose this quote about what's the best that could happen. Hold on, I need to mute all y'all because I'm getting some feedback here. There we go. Okay, this quote about what's the best that could happen actually came from a book that I came across the other day while I was on Twitter, and it's a new book out by Debbie Miller. The title is What's the Best That Can Happen? New Possibilities for Teachers and Readers. I have not read this book. I'm not necessarily promoting it, but what I loved was when you actually go to Heinemann's website, this is a quote that is on there. And it says, one of the greatest joys of teaching is anticipating children's brilliance. And so when you think about what's the best that can happen, the best that can happen is that we stir that up and add to a child's knowledge bank, I think, in helping them grow. This is the other part that I just love. In What's the Best That Can Happen, Debbie Miller confronts a challenge all teachers face, the feeling of being stuck and the fear of trying something new. And I know that is sitting in the bottom of your stomachs right now as you think about next year and you don't have your word wall words and you don't have your scope and sequence yet. It's all new. So she explores how questions help us look beyond the limitations of what we've done and discover powerful new opportunities for engaging every reader. And really, this can't state our goal any better. Be open to questions, ask questions of yourself, ask questions of what you've done in the past. Whether you're 1 year in or 30 years in, that idea of being reflective should be a constant. Is what I've always done effective? There's some areas we're changing kind of even some of our whole philosophy on a few things of how we've taught things in the past, because when we stop and look at our data over years, it's really not been the most effective. So we're going to be making some changes. All right, with my pep talk, let's dig into workshop. So why? Why are we moving to this workshop model? First, we recognize that teaching and learning are not a one-size-fits-all reality. When we spend the majority of our time either just in guided reading or a whole class comprehension lesson all 5 days or 4 days of the week, we're assuming this idea of one-size-fits-all. And we know that that's not a reality. And so a workshop model really does help you address that. 2, readers and writers should be learning strategies that they will use every day and not just taught on the day they are taught, or not just on the day that they are taught. So, reading is a little different than math. These skills we're going to constantly come back to them. You're going to find we're not going to just hang out on one thing for 5 days. We're teaching something that you're going to use right now, but then when you go over to the reading center, you should be using it over there. When you come to the guided reading table, you should be using that. And when we read aloud together, you should be applying that same skill or that same thinking. And so that's another reason why we're moving to more of a workshop approach. Third, we must be able to differentiate and provide feedback in a timely manner. So sometimes our feedback can be limited when we spend all of our time whole class and we don't give students time for choice or students time to interact with each other. we get tied up. And so we want to be free to be able to meet with conferences or small groups or individuals, because that's that immediate feedback. We see them do something and we can provide feedback right away. For the very nature and demands of our new standards require that they be more connected and integrated than ever before. So that last reason, why are we moving to a workshop model? It's really driven by the interconnected nature of our TEKS. And as we dive into those this summer, I really think you'll start to see that. All right, so what is it? What do you mean by workshop model? Well, you really know. I think you know more than you think you do. At its most basic form, a workshop model has the same 3 parts that you all most likely know. There's going to be a whole group mini lesson. There is going to be an independent or partner work time. Usually during this time, the teacher is with a small group or conferring with individuals. The one thing to keep in mind that with the workshop model is during this independent time, hold on, I'm going to get my pointer. Here we go. During this time, this is not teacher time, and I know it's hard. I know you guys have jam-packed schedules. Remember, this is not your time to go answer emails, to catch up on things. I understand if there's those little bits and pieces, but your really goal, once you've had your mini lesson and you have students doing some kind of independent work or partner work or small group, even maybe some other small group things together, you have work to do with the student. Okay, moving on. Lastly, just like always, there should be a wrap-up or share of learning. I do think this is a piece that we tend to leave off a lot, especially if time management is hard for you. I know for me, it's something I have to really work at. But there is kind of an expectation that there's always a wrap-up or a share of the learning. So you're coming back together as a whole group to talk about what did we learn and how did you apply it when you were working in your group or with your partner or by yourself. These are nothing new. You guys have seen this. This is a lot like our Lucy model, so it shouldn't be anything new. What is new is this thinking of blending a workshop model with the HMH resources. And I'm kind of scanning over to my notes on this one because as I was really thinking through this, I really kind of stopped and thought, okay, so explain first of all, why are we using a basal series? Because I know if you listen to podcasts like me, there's a few of some of the most popular authors that we listen to that will talk as though a basal series and a workshop model are really 2 different things and kind of conflict. But there's really a purpose and an intent for both. So first of all, our HMH Basal series that we've adopted is really strong in content knowledge and ways to support you as teachers, both as an experienced teacher or a new teacher. They are relevant and current and aligned with our new standards. And so there's a lot of support and content knowledge there for you. You know, I think one of the most surprising things to me when I came out of college, especially as a primary teacher, is that, yes, I mean, I had classes, and really depending on the college you went to, I didn't really learn how to teach kids how to read. I learned a lot of other things, but it really wasn't until I got into my master's work or the first campus I was on, I was in a really intense coaching relationship for the first 2 years. And so that's where the Basal series comes in, is it's going to give some of that support to our teachers who may not have had that in other places. Another really important reason for Basal series, having a common text is a resource that gives us all a solid starting point. So we're going to talk a lot about giving students choice in what they read, but there will be times in your week, early in the week, where you're all working from a common piece of text. And that's where we really get to deepen our discussion. It's where we get to really model that thinking aloud, because our kids need us to teach them as much how to think as they do how to just read the words that are on the page. And so having that common text is really cool. The coolest thing about HMH, your new series, is that your kids are actually going to be getting their reader, their book is consumable. And the stories on the pages where the text actually is, it is from edge to edge. So when they're in that story, let's say, I know in one of them, there's a piggy and elephant story. And it looks just like the book from page to page. They can write on it. We can annotate. We can circle things that we notice. And there's a lot of support in the teacher edition to help you know how to do that with kids. So the Basal series also helps us to support that interconnected nature of our standards, and it bridges the gap between brand new and experienced teachers. So I really think you guys are going to find a great balance of support no matter where you fall on the spectrum in your years of experience. All right, so now my question is, why then, if it's so great, why aren't we just going that? Well, HMH is actually built for a workshop model. It's built with the idea that you have some heavier days where you're really spending a lot of time as a whole class, but then you've got days where you're really doing more of a mini lesson. A true full-on workshop model really requires a very skilled teacher to manage and maneuver all of that. It also requires students who have their own real sense of agency and can take control of their learning. And we understand that not all of our students are in that place. And so our hope is that using our HMH to guide our direct, intentional whole group instruction will allow us to begin to build stronger readers who can take, oh, we talked about inferencing. I want to go read my book about whatever they chose over on the shelf and apply what we learned about inferencing there. That's really our ultimate goal, is that students take ownership of those skills and begin to apply them in things that they've chosen. But we need a bridge to get there. Blending also supports and gives language to the spectrum of teachers, and so helping them understand that. And then as we support and model for students how to think critically and make decisions, the stronger our days of full workshop model will be. So you're going to find kind of this blend of kind of whole class comprehension instruction, also with that idea of a little mini lesson and then those smaller group things. All right, let's keep going. Now that we kind of know about blending the two models, let's look at what it's actually going to look like. Okay, so I want you to think of your literacy block next year, your literacy day. I understand fully that it may not actually be one solid block of time when you've got, you know, a special or lunch or something like that in there, but I want you to think of your literacy block in 3 big chunks. We're going to be thinking of it in foundational skills workshop, the reading workshop, and the writing workshop. So basically your day will be kind of divided into 3 workshops. Obviously, reading workshop's going to be probably your longest. You're going to find today I'm actually not going to talk about time because with a workshop model, your time becomes much more flexible. I can kind of give you some approximates or what I'm thinking, but this is going to be really structured around you and your classroom. You'll still have your about 187 minutes per day-ish when we look at PEAMS minutes. Those, as far as we know, have not changed. So it's just a matter of dividing those as what works best for you when you look at your resources and what you need to teach. All right, so we're going to go through each of these, the foundational skills, the reading workshop, and the writing workshop. Try to keep an eye on my time for you. All right, so let's start with the foundational skills workshop. Foundational skills is strand 1 of your new TEK. So if you haven't heard, your TEKs are divided into 7 strands. The foundational language, comprehension, response, multiple genre, author's purpose, comprehension, and inquiry and research. Hey, I didn't do all of that from memory. I have a cheat sheet to my left. But so foundational skills, this is your phonics skills. This is your spelling. This is your vocabulary and oral language and all of those things. So one block of your day is going to look a little different, or your week, I should say. Your week is going to look a little different from the beginning of the week to the end of the week. So early in the week, your foundational skills overview that we will be providing you in your materials will largely have a direct or explicit foundational skills instruction, and it says lessons because they're chunked into little pieces. For kinder, I know that you'll have a high frequency word piece, same for first. You'll have a phonemic awareness piece, and then you have an actual phonics piece. So everything's kind of on this first day will feel like a lot of small lessons put together, but this is an area where we are making a shift as a district. We know that kind of the embedded into our morning message, kind of that morning meeting routine, we have not delivered as direct, explicit phonics instruction that we could. And in looking at our results and watching guided reading videos and walking campuses and those kind of things, we're learning that we as teachers and our students, we need to learn a little more about direct phonics instruction, and we need to provide a little more direct, explicit instruction for our kids. And so that's our goal this year, is largely on the first 2 to 3 days of the week, and it's going to look a little different in first than it does in kinder, and so on through second and the other grades. But there are phonics TEKs all the way through 5th grade. just so you know. So your first 2 days may just look like more whole class, little small lessons divided out into certain areas. And then afterwards, you would have a come together time and think, okay, all the things we talked about, we worked on blending, and I'm trying to think back to some of the weeks that I've already planned. You would just kind of have a discussion about what did we talk about, and you might review one or two of those things, but you're going to have some kind of little short, quick 2-minute wrap up discussion. So that might be early in the week, those first day or two, maybe 3, just really depending on what's being introduced that week. The rest of the week might look like this. Your day would start with a quick phonemic awareness game, like a just activity. I know in kindergarten, I was just looking last week, it's all oral, it's blending, and you're blending syllables. So we're going to do some work and practice with that. And then there's also high frequency word games. So specific to the high frequency words that we introduce for that week, every day we're going to play some kind of little game as a class. Short, quick. Then we're going to move into a little 5-minute mini lesson focused on the phonics or spelling skill that we're doing that week. Kinder, early on, this is going to be around letter ID and letter sound, and then you're going to move on into actually combining those things to begin your spelling. So you'll have this is really this idea of 2 little mini lessons is the best way to think about it. Once you've done that, then this is where you break into that idea like workshop of small group or individual in partner time. You'll have, and we're going to help support this, but you'll have some time where you have tabletop games or activities. Not everybody has to have a worksheet in front of them. It's not that. They're at one table. They may have the high frequency word game that we played together. Another one that they might be building their name with Play-Doh. Maybe another one, they're working on handwriting. And then that fourth one maybe is a rotation, and that's where the small group is coming to me. Or there's another activity, and as the teacher, I'm walking around having little conferences. This is a place where you're going to have a lot of say in choosing kind of how this is going to be managed. So while these tabletop games are going on, you would be having some small group targeted instruction. And I will tell you that your new resources are great at giving you additional ways to teach whatever you taught up in your mini lesson. So you have some kids you didn't get it and you want to visit them, there's lots of support for you in that. And then finally, you would have a wrap up or share of the learning for that day. So this is kind of what your foundational skills workshop might look like. I know you've got lots of questions and maybe not totally clear, but I want you to give you a minute to talk about this as a team. I'm gonna do 2 things, so don't start talking yet. I want you to think about, okay, what in your thinking was confirmed? Is there anything that like, oh, I really agree we need to do more explicit phonics instruction or whatever? Talk about with your team or whoever's there with you, what thinking was confirmed and what are some challenges you're having when you look at this? I'm going to slide it back to the other screen so you can see that workshop design, but I want you to think about what was confirmed and what challenges you're thinking. So there's that, and I'll give you just a couple of minutes to kind of discuss. Feel free to respond in the chat as well. Go ahead. Okay, I know I haven't given you a whole lot of time, but I really want to make sure we get through everything. A couple of things I want to address as I was skimming through your comments. Yes, I'm excited that you're excited about direct explicit phonics instruction. Your campus instructional specialists and your administrators are going to be doing some training on that even before this year is over. Pat them on the back for doing that, and then they'll be able to come and share that with you. And then in September, we will also do a little bit more training on that as well. A couple questions I saw. I know someone was asking about, will things be thematic? My answer is yes and no. No, they won't be thematic like we used to do, like, oh, this week we're all doing everything under the ocean and science and math and everything's going to be about the ocean. There will be social studies and science will be tied. We're working closely with those departments, but they won't always necessarily be taught at the same exact time. We've done some research and really found that the kids actually do better when they encounter content multiple times versus, okay, we're talking about, let's say, communities, and we're only going to study communities right here in social studies and in reading. So really what we're trying to do is that in reading, the themes or the essential questions that you're going to encounter through each module will tie. They do tie to social studies and science TEKS, but they will be used to support and build when they come to that in their science or social studies. There's a chance that sometimes they may overlap, but it's not going to be all the time. Science and social studies are looking at the scope and sequence from HMH and the order that it's presented, and they're going to give us some information so we can say, hey, when you come to talk about animals, make sure you stress this, because that's what they need to know when they come to that unit in science. And so that's where some of those connections are going to be built. But just for multiple reasons, both through research and through just the nature of our FOSS kits and some of those things, they won't be aligned perfectly, but we are working hard to get more alignment than we've had in the past. Hopefully that answers your question. Another question real quick that's not necessarily workshop specific. Yes, all of these resources are coming in Spanish. The really cool thing about this series is that they're Spanish. There will also be stories that are in English that were actually adapted from original Spanish text. So you're actually going to see this great cross-cultural connection through both Spanish and English. So it's really exciting. All right. Moving on. I love some of your thoughts about the more explicit instruction. How will time and minutes be broken down for us to use the workshop model? So you will get a resource digitally that is the GPS. It's basically just a guide to HMH's structure, and there's resources about setting up stations. And they talk a little bit about time in there, but what I want to let you know is that all Basel series plan way more things than you need. So as soon as you see it, don't get overwhelmed and think, oh my gosh, I'm teaching every single thing in here. As we give you your overviews, yes, we're going to give you some guidance on kind of how to break your time apart. Really today, what we want to build is just kind of what is the structure of those 3 workshops. And then we'll begin as we dive into it and you see your materials, we'll talk more about time. Okay. We're going to bite off one little chunk at a time here. All right, let's keep going though. So this is kind of what your foundational skills workshop would look like. So let's move on to the next one, and that is the reading workshop. The easiest way for me to explain this to you and help you think about this is really to think of, traditionally you've always had your comprehension block and your guided reading and literacy station time. You are going to keep that guided reading and literacy station time. It's not going anywhere in K1. We are still, as a matter of fact, a lot of the upper grades are going to start doing more guided reading. But that time is still going to be there. What will change maybe is from some of your higher groups, you may be able to work with them more during your reader's workshop and not see them as many days, or to make up for those days that you often don't get to see them in guided reading because you're so busy with your striving readers. So let's talk about it. I know you're going to have questions, so let me give you a little bit of an overview of what it's going to look like. Okay. In the HMH series, I said that there's these things called essential questions. For kinder, the first day of the week, whether that's a Monday or a Tuesday or whatever it is, but the first day of a week, you're always going to be doing something with building knowledge around that essential question. For both K and 1, we're starting out talking about making friends. Kinder's really about like getting to know the school and people around you, and first grade's really focused on friendship, but they're very similar. So every day in kinder, you have a little lesson built around talking and asking questions and answering questions. It's going to tie into our inquiry and research that we'll be putting into place probably more in the second reporting period. And then for first grade, this looks a little different. It really only happens on the first day of a module. So to help you understand this, HMH materials for kinder, you'll have a module, and each module in kinder has 4 weeks. So you would have module 1, week 1, module 1, week 2, module 1, week 3, and then module 1, week 4, and then you go on to module 2 and start over with a new first week. First grade, yours is the same, except you only have 3 weeks per module instead of 4. And as we get into materials, we'll talk about that more. So to let you know, that first day of the week for kinder and that first day of a module, you're going to have a lot more whole class time because you're really starting to build this knowledge map and this learning around that essential idea. And it gives you some really pointed lessons around oral language, which is in our TEKS. Now, what you do need to know is that you're doing this, but you would still go into guided reading. So guided reading's not going anywhere. There's still an expectation that it's happening every day of the week. Then you would have, just like the other one, after guided reading in stations is over, you're going to come back for a little wrap up and share of learning. What did we talk about over here before we went into stations? Could that be applied? You know, if you talked about making friends in a station today, how did you work collaboratively with a friend? Something like that. Now, the rest of the week, this is where I need you to take a deep breath and know that it's really exciting, but I don't want you to be overwhelmed because it is really good stuff. Early in the week, maybe after, because if you, see, I want to keep my words straight here. So kindergarten, remember only on Monday you really have this lesson, so this would be Tuesday. For first grade over here, it might be Monday of the first week of the unit or the module, but then Monday of the next week you start here. Okay, I know that's clear as mud. But so that's why it says reading comprehension could be on days 1 through 4 or 1 through 5. It really depends on where you're at in your module. Are you introducing the module or are you halfway through the module? That's where there's some flexibility between these two things. Reading comprehension, all those skills that we're teaching with that are still going to be taught. So here's some familiarity for you through shared reading activities, through interactive read alouds. You'll both be getting big books. Kindergarten, you don't get the My Book, which is that one that has every kid has the same text. You're going to be doing a lot more with big books, which makes a lot more sense because some of our friends can't find the page. And so we're going to do a lot more work with big books in kinder. First grade, you'll notice that it does say independent read, and it says that first for first grade. So on the first couple of days when you're really dealing with everyone's in the same piece of text, and it might be a longer piece of text, or even if it's short, there is an expectation, though, that you are not, as the teacher, doing the reading. You might read a page, but then we're going to send those kids off, or we're going to ask them to read a couple of pages. Then we're going to stop and discuss. And I will tell you, I've already dug into the first book that your first graders will have, the first common text that they have, and it's very appropriate for first of the year. Now, of course, you're going to pair students who can't read and can't access the text. Some you might have to sit close by you, a little bit like the Read It Their Way, but it's going to have a little bit of a twist. So depending on where you are in the module, this type of reading comprehension lesson is going to be 1-2 days where you're doing a lot more whole class, but then you're still going to go into self-sustained, and I want you to notice that does say self-sustained reading. This may be where they're reading this text from up here. It may be where they're selecting their own text as you get later in the week. But there is an expectation that SSR is occurring at least anywhere from starting on day 2 or 3 through day 5. So that's around 4 to 5 days a week. So If you're somebody who's kind of let SSR just kind of drop off to the wayside and haven't really found a place for it, we're trying to build that into this workshop model so that you have a place for it, and that kids begin to start to self-select text. And this is also part of the same Nutique. It's actually called self-sustained reading, and it says that they self-select text and read on their own for extended or growing periods of time. So for kindergarten, that time is going to start out really short. I know those first few weeks, it may be 2 minutes. We're lucky if we get them on the carpet and with a piece of text or a picture or something for 2 minutes. But our end of year goal is 5 to 10 minutes for kinder. And that end of year goal is 10 to 15 minutes where these kids are reading, truly reading on their own. And you, the teacher, would be conferring, as it says here, or maybe pulling a strategy group. So this is a great place, especially first grade. As you get a little further into the year, you know, a lot of times we have a hard time meeting with those higher groups in our guided reading table. So maybe those are the kids you really focus on meeting with here. They're really pretty independent at grade level text. And so I'm going to stop in wherever they're at. Hey, everybody, you know, Sarah, John, and Kim, you guys come here, bring the book you chose to read today, and let's talk about making an inference. We did that all together in our text on Monday. I want to see how you made an inference in your text today. So that might be what it looks like. After this time, you would go into guided reading and literacy stations and then have a wrap up. Now, one thing I do want to clarify, don't panic. We're not going to leave you stranded. I understand for both K and 1, there are a lot of routines to set up with SSR at the beginning of the year. Kindergarten, I tried to add a lot of that in for you this year and kind of break it apart a little bit more than we had in the past. Those types of lessons like how to be a rock star reader, how to choose a book, how to put your book in your bag, how to find your reading spot, how to keep going when you think you've read the whole book. Just some of those lessons are going to be built into early in the year. So this reading comprehension lesson may be even shorter so that there's time for this. Now, this heavier whole group reading comprehension lesson where we're all working with a similar text for the first time with that text might be day 1 or 2 or day 1 and 2 of our week, but we've still got maybe 2 to 3 days left in the week. And so this rotation might start with this. And this is particularly for first grade. Kindergarten, you're going to kind of hang out in this routine here. Whereas first grade, you're going to kind of be alternating between these depending on what's in your resources and where you are in the unit. After you've read, let's say you read a Piggy and Elephant story, kind of one day all together, you really discussed it deeply, you're going to come back for what a close read. And it might be, okay, we've talked about author's purpose. I want you to turn to page 16 and let's talk about why the author did this or his purpose for writing here. That's just one example, but you're going to do a really short little mini lesson around one of your skill or strategy focuses with the text that you had read previously, and then you're going to send them off to their SSR time. And again, they may choose to read, if it was Piggy and Elephant, they may choose to read that again on their own, or they may choose another book. You have some flexibility in what that's going to look like for you. Okay, so I know this is not wholly and totally clear. You see that the days are very flexible and how that's going to look. Again, what the best thing I can kind of help you hook into is that early in the week, it's more teacher heavy. By mid to late week, there should be a lot more students doing not only their own reading, but maybe even having choice in their reading. It is an expectation that SSR is happening more frequently than it has in the past. Guided reading still stays part of it, and your wrap up. So yeah, you're looking at, if you consider guided reading as part of your whole reading workshop, you've got 45 minutes to an hour there, plus another 30 minutes for what would have normally been your comprehension time. So yeah, you're looking at around an hour and a half for reader's workshop, but remember, there's going to be some flexibility depending on where you are in the module, where you are in the week with your foundational workshop and those kind of things. The way my brain works is I would do my foundational workshop really starting off my day and then go into my reader's workshop. And then if I had to have a break, it might fall between my reader's and my writer's workshop. But don't fear, because reading and writing are still going to have some connection. All right, so I'm going to give you just a minute to talk, and I'm going to skim the comments that you guys have left. This is what I'd like you to talk about. Thinking about reading workshop. What gives you peace? Is there something you saw that you're like, okay, I'm not so scared now? And what gives you pause? What makes you go, I'm a little worried about that? So I'm going to take it back, peace and pause. And here's the screen. So I'm going to mute mine for just a minute. Feel free to respond in the comments, and then I'll come back and ask if anyone has any comments to make out loud. So visit. All right, I'm back. It's 4:16 and we still have one more workshop to cover, which actually we should be good. Thank you for sharing. I know Kathy and Sheila are also on here, and so they're trying to help respond to some of your questions. So if I haven't answered a question you put in the chat, please go back and kind of skim the chat. You may have gotten an answer from one of them. I love some of your piece things. Flexibility, yes, there definitely is going to be some flexibility built in here for you. Some space for you to make choices for your students while also receiving information about the best place to start and the things that you really need to have. I'm glad some of you are seeing that it flows together. I get it. Those of you, I can't remember where it was, I saw somebody, do you have a video? Can you model for us? I wish I had that already. Yes, we are going to continue to try to give you support and more information as we go along. This is your first dive into it. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, take a deep breath and know that the more you settle into this and the more you think about it, you're going to be able to shape it and understand it for your kids in your classroom. I just had a thought and it left me. So it'll come back in a minute. Setting up routines. Yes, I will tell you that we're going to start learning from day one. And so you are going to have to balance as the teacher how to set your routines up. We are going to be able to give you suggestions for that, but largely that's going to fall on you to set that up and how that's going to fit best in your classroom. Good. I'm glad that some of you like the flexibility and the flow. Okay, pause, time to prepare. Yes, those tabletop games mentioned back in the writer's workshop, the foundational workshop, that can be time consuming. That's one of the pieces that some of the teachers who are going to be coming in to help me write curricular resources, that's one of the things we're going to be focused on. I will tell you there's actually quite a bit of resource through your HMH stuff, especially when you think about literacy stations in the reading workshop. They really focus on 5 primary specific stations, and they give you something every week for those 5, and they're not things that take a lot of making. Some of them are things that they'll start to understand the routine and be able to use those over and over, and so we're going to suggest that you really try those for this first year. Those of you who like to have like 25 different stations in your room, I totally get it because you like those small groups who are at stations. So you may be able to think about like doubling up a station and they just happens in 2 different places. Because yes, managing and planning for the workshop model and trying to plan for lots of stations may start to create a bigger headache for you than it's worth. You really want to work smarter, not harder. So just kind of be thinking about how necessary is it that I have, 10 different stations? Are there ways that 2 stations could be doing the same or very similar thing? Are there ways that I could offer more choice for my kids in stations instead of like forced rotations? That's a whole nother thing. We can go there someday. Tabletop games, pre-made. There are some, yes, that are, and then others we will be giving you suggestions. But really, our ideas with the tabletop games are not. They're things that are going to be able to be built and used over and over. Even one like that I planned for the first week. There's really nothing to plan other than teaching your kids how to blend. And I mean, like I could see just you roll a dice and I roll a 1 and I have to blend 2 syllables or think of a 2-syllable word. Cup, cake. Some things like that where there's not a lot of prep. That's really our idea. We're still building on that, and I'm going to pull from the teachers that are going to be on the curriculum writing team. All right, I'm going to keep us going because we're moving into 10 minutes, and we still have one workshop left to discuss. All right, writing workshop. This isn't changing a whole lot, okay? The only thing that's really going to change, because I know a lot of you are wondering, will our writing be more tied to our reading? Are we doing Lucy? The answer is yes, we are still doing Lucy. It is going to kind of mesh. HMH does have a writer's workshop, but specifically for kindergarten, their writing is really taught through interactive writing. And so kindergarten, you're going to have a little bit more interactive writing that you might have not done in the past, but then you're going to come behind it and support with your traditional Lucy lessons in Writer's Workshop. We're also going to be building in for you. So let's talk about that. So interactive writing. This is probably for most of you going to occur between 3 to 5 days of the week. So if I'm thinking of my writing workshop, if I'm able to fit it all in one block, that's great. But if you needed to take this interactive writing and maybe put it at the first of your block instead, totally understandable. It doesn't necessarily have to be the start of your full block of writing workshop. Whatever they're writing here, though, will tie to some of your mini lessons that happen throughout the rest of the workshop. For example, what I can tell you, I know like in kindergarten, the first week in the HMH materials, you're kind of doing some opinion writing and just writing about what you know. And so you're going to be working together to kind of make a little class book about things we know about kindergarten, things we've learned about kindergarten. And then they're going to move into Writer's Workshop. And just like those first few times that they write in Lucy is just writing about things they know, just drawing about things they know. So that's kind of a loose example. But so you would have an interactive writing time. First grade, you will have some of this as well. I'm not going to give a whole lot of detail on it right now. We'll do some more Zoom sessions on interactive writing because I know that's not a common practice that I've seen in a lot of classrooms. So then as far as the rest of the writing workshop, it's just like it's always been. You're going to have mini lessons. They will either be Lucy Calkins lessons, or we're going to build in some of the mentor sentence routine that some of our older grades have been using. It comes from Anderson's Patterns of Power, and we're building off of that. So if any of you have Patterns of Power on your campus, it's a K-5 book, and the way we look at mentor sentences and we think about imitating, what do we see? So we might pull a sentence out of the text that we read in Reader's Workshop together, or a read aloud that we did, and we'll look at that sentence to see, first of all, is it a complete sentence? Does it make sense? And then we might try to build our own complete sentence. So that's just kind of a glimpse. If you're not familiar with the mentor sentence routine, that's kind of what it will look like. So some of your mini lessons will be more around grammar, and some will be Lucy lessons, and sometimes Lucy lessons are grammar and sometimes they're spelling, so they're kind of a little all over the place. You also will still have freedom where I might plan or offer 3 kind of must-have mini lessons. You will still have space to make some choice about the mini lessons that your kids need. All right, then you're going to move into independent writing time. Remember, during this time, students are doing the writing. Teacher is either leading a small group or meeting one-on-one for conferring. And then finally, we're going to come back to wrap up and share. We're going to go back to our mini lesson or something we did in interactive writing that day and talk about how do we maybe try to apply it in our own writing. Or it might be having a student share their writing from that day. This can look a little different, but this always should be a part of your workshop. Okay, so not a lot of changes there. Really, interactive writing is going to be the biggest change, and I do plan to do some kind of Zoom session or something early in the year to kind of talk about interactive writing a little more. If any of you attended the spring fling and got to go to the session about magical morning meetings with Miss Graham. She is a kindergarten teacher over at McKenzie who has been doing quite a bit with interactive writing. And I will tell you, she's changed up her whole morning meeting, but really how she's done interactive writing and kind of brought in some of the science and social studies teaks and the different types of writing. She said she's seen her children able to apply that in Writer's Workshop like never before. And so she's really seen a lot of growth. So, okay, we are almost out of time. It's 4:24. So before I leave you, I want you to talk about this question regarding Writing Workshop. What stays the same for you? Okay, so most of you hopefully have been using Writing Workshop at least. So there's some things that are going to stay the same. So talk for a minute about that comfort of the things that'll stay the same. And then I want you to think about, based on what we've talked about or what I've shared with you today, what are you doing right now in your Writer's Workshop that may need to change? Okay, so I'm going to leave those questions up because the Writing Workshop format's not a whole lot different. I'm going to give you just about 1 to 2 minutes to talk about that. Go ahead. Okay, I'm going to jump back in. I know that wasn't a lot of time. Thank you for those of you who are providing some feedback in the comments. One question I did see was about the Spring Fling notes and sessions. If someone on your campus was there and got the handout, there was a QR and there's a link to a file that has all the folders in it. I will try to, when I go back to read the notes from today, I will find that and try to put that maybe in the white space for you so you guys can go back and visit some of that. But I would say check with your campus instructional specialist. They'd be your first point of contact to get that information. Good. So yeah, we're gonna be building that grammar into your mini lessons, giving you a little more support with that. I think you're gonna really like the mentor sentence lessons. When I taught ESL, I followed that same structure with my K through 6 kids. So I think you're gonna really like it. All right. Before we wrap up, there's just a couple of things I want to touch on. So one thing to keep in mind: teaching is this. Teaching is 80% planning and 20% instruction. With this idea of workshop model, the interconnected nature of our TEKS, and having this wealth of resources, this is going to have to become priority number one. And this isn't just that team planning of talking. This is really that personal, as a teacher, your time invested in getting your materials ready and your lessons prepared. So here's a few tips that I thought through with my team. Tips for making the workshop model work best. So number one, keep the purpose and standards in the driver's seat. So no matter any decision that you make about your workshop, about your literacy instruction, about any of your instruction, the standards are the driver. What is it you're teaching? What is it you want kids to be able to do? Secondly, be thoughtful about how your time is used. Time will slip away from you faster than ever in this model because you get involved with a small group or a group of kids, or the resources may seem like, oh, this is going to take me forever. I'm going to take all my time to do this. When it says mini lesson or it says close read, you want to keep it to as much of a mini lesson. Some days mini lesson may be 20 minutes early in the week. Later in the week, that mini lesson should look more like 5, sometimes less. Just really think about what's my purpose today and be mindful of how you're using your time. If you don't have an Apple Watch, they're expensive, but I love mine. I love that it vibrates. When I set the timer, I'm like, where's this been all my life? Okay. Thirdly, plan intentionally for all small groups and your one-on-one conferences. Small groups and one-on-one conferring do not happen just by chance. You plan who you meet with. You have an idea of why you need to meet with them. Sometimes in a one-on-one conference, it might go a little different direction based on what they're reading or based on how they respond, but you are still planned for those. And we're going to leave you space in your new customizable overviews. You should be excited to see those. We're going to leave you some space where you can actually type in them and plan for these types of things. All right, next. Have and stick with consistent routines for students. I think where we sometimes think, oh, it's all my kids. Really, sometimes it's on us. They're too crazy. They can't make choices about stations, or I can't have 4 kids in the station. Sometimes it's because we're not consistent with our routines. I am the world's worst about consistency. I really have to work hard for that. 4:30, I got to hurry. Develop and use systems for managing yourself and your materials. You've got to have systems in place. How am I going to keep up with conference notes? How am I going to keep up with this? Where am I going to put that? If you are not a planner or an organizer by nature, climb in my boat. We got to all work on it. All right, we're done for today. Final questions and thoughts. I'll hang out for another 5 or 10 minutes. You're welcome to stay if you need to jet. I totally understand, but I'll hang here for a minute to answer questions and concerns. I'm not going to dive into a lot of your questions. Some of you have typed questions about resources, and Sheila and Kathy are trying to help me respond to that, but really, if you've got questions specifically to workshop model, that's what I'd like to hang around and talk for. There's actually a link. If you want to copy that down, you can have that link to the slideshow right now. All right, those of you who need to leave, feel free to leave. I'm here. If you have questions, feel free to speak up or type them in. Thanks for joining us today, by the way.
Elisa,
Yes.
this is Tanika Price. A question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
In regards to the workshop model, you talked about the different stages, the different components, pieces of it.
Mm-hmm.
You say you guys don't have a model of it just yet of what that would look like. And so I guess for me, my question is there a way to get what a typical day would look like for a teacher that's trying to emulate this new model?
So there'll be a couple things in their GPS that kind of give them some suggested times, and of course with that, it's going to go from the lowest amount of time to the greatest amount of time, so they can kind of keep that in mind. Really, I would say to go back to these slides, because all of our grade levels are going to kind of build off of this. My foundational workshop on Monday, Tuesday might look like those first boxes on the left, and then the other days are going to look like this. That's really the most that we have right now. I know in the past we have on the PEAMS minutes, we kind of had a little breakdown for them. We haven't quite gotten to that point yet. We're still working through getting a few of the resources in to really make sure we have all of that before we make that specific of recommendations. Does that make sense?
Yes. And then
Okay.
the teachers, last question, then I'll leave you alone.
Yeah, you're fine.
I know you have a group of teachers that are going to come, and you guys are going to take the modules. I know they're broken down into 4 modules, right? So you're going to take the modules, and that's how they're going to take the teach and then break it down for that week, correct?
Okay, so it's really interesting because our TEKs, it's not going to be one TEK that we break apart for the week. We are not in a silo approach anymore, and this is going to be the hardest thing for us to kind of get our heads around, but it's really how reading should be taught. I can tell you, for example, in the second week of first grade, I know that we're going to talk about inferencing, author's purpose. We also do some stuff with story structure as far as like plot having beginning, middle, and end. And so there's like about 4 what we would normally have called major focuses for the week. And that's because readers have to think about all of those things. we're going to continue to cycle through those. So it's not an expectation that that's the only time I'm going to teach inference. And by the end of that week, my first graders in week 2 need to know how to make an inference. But we're going to go ahead and start to touch on that, because we're going to, every time we read a text, there's a possibility to make an inference. So when they actually see their overview, they're actually going to see all of the standards up at the top of their overview that we have decided are part of what we call the must-have lessons. And then they can also will be able to customize that overview based on the choice lessons that they choose that might address other TEKs that we haven't listed. That's just the hard nature of reading and writing, is that there's not going to be a solid focus TEK. Now, we are going to give you like lesson and module targets and things that you really need to be focused on. And we just, Andrea just kind of came across a new tool that will help us. It's a TEKS mastery tool, and that may be kind of what you're looking for or needing. And that we just kind of found out a way to do that in the last like 2 days. So I can't even talk a whole lot about it, because she went to Crest and that was where she found out about that. So I don't even know if that answers your question or not. Okay. Reading's hard. It's rocket science, really, is what a lot of people say. All right. Anybody else who's on still? Yeah. Auxiger, thanks. My teammates are commenting. Remember, you're not in this alone. We're all taking through, but I don't want to discourage you guys, because it's really exciting. I mean, the quality of the materials is phenomenal. I think you're going to feel like you finally get to teach reading the way it's always meant to be taught. And I hope that makes sense. I don't think you're going to feel like you're teaching to a test. We don't even know exactly what the next test is going to look like. So there's all kinds of changes and things that are still up in the air. So I want you to feel confident in teaching reading is teaching reading. There's, that has not necessarily changed. We're really just getting to the point where we're going to be able to do what we really should have always been doing, like really thinking about phonics and how does that play into and balance whole language, if that makes sense. I don't know. I can't think about anything else. Anybody else have any other specific questions?
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. I'm going to sign off. It's 3:36. Thank you for what you're doing. Finish out your year, and you're halfway through the week. Have a great rest of the week and a great weekend. Bye.